Love is all we need. So goes many a song, and now a growing body of psychological research supports this view. But loving actions don't always come naturally. Parents seeking to give a child unconditional love can shower her with too much approval and too many rewards. It turns out that even 7-year-olds know when they deserve a trophy or an A and when they don't. The quandary: emotions are natural, and yet they need to be managed for a child to be happy and be successful in every area of her life. In this video, we will talk about love and the brain, why too much praise weakens a child's school performance, the ABC of emotional IQ, and the science of happiness, that is positive psychology. Emotional competence includes self-regulation and being able to read other people's feelings. Both are important personal and social skills. Children who are adept at these skills are more liked by their peers. How do you spot these abilities in a child? Now, these are the children who don't act out when they are upset or angry, but asks for help. They can tell when a friend is sad, and so might try to console the friend by touching them or saying something supportive. This is called empathy, another manifestation of a child's high emotional social competence, also called emotional IQ by child psychologist Daniel Goleman in his 1995 book Emotional Intelligence. Lise Elliott, in her book What's Going On in There, How the Brain and Mind Develops in the First 5 Years of Life, compares a baby's brain to a computer but points out one big difference between the two. A child's brain programs itself. No loading of software is necessary. The programming is in her genes, wired and waiting for the right environmental influence to help it manifest as behaviors. This genetic activity happens on a molecular level with a unique pattern of electrical excitation that subtly alters synapses in the child's brain. What is the best first food for this brain growth that is necessary for all other growths? In a word, that is love. As was made clear in this in the early videos that we have tackled, a baby's emotional IQ is shaped by his earliest bonding experiences with a parent. A secure attachment functions like a rich soil for a seedling. As the baby matures, the continuing experience of unconditional love from parents to child then serves as the sunshine and water for the seeds to grow. From this start, other kinds of learning will blossom. Now, happiness, anger, and surprise, along with fear, disgust, and sadness, are considered the basic universal emotions. People have them everywhere in the world in every cultures. In psychology, an emotion is understood to have three parts: a physiological change, a subjective feeling, and an overt behavior or expression. Child psychologists working during the past 3 decades have paid special attention to how children's emotional competence affect other areas of their development. In a longitudinal study completed in 2003, psychological researcher Susan Denham looked at the question of which emotional experience in preschool around the ages of 3 and 4 are most closely linked with the child's later social abilities in kindergarten around ages 5 and 6. Denham wanted to know what emotional behaviors predict social behaviors. The approach used to determine the child's early emotional behaviors include naturalistic observation and an interview with the child's mother. The child's later social competence in kindergarten was measured in two ways. First, the researchers asked the teachers to rate the child's cooperativeness and sensitivity to peers. And number two, other children in the class were asked to rate the likability of each child. Now, this study's results showed just how predictive early emotional learning is for later social behaviors. The steps taken by Denham and her colleagues in this process show the particulars of to support this point. Number one, emotional expressivity. While observing the younger children for 5 minute periods, researchers noted the frequency of their smiles and frowns as evidence of their positive and negative emotions. Number two is emotional knowledge. Emotional knowledge was determined by asking the child to name what emotion a puppet would be experiencing in 8 common situations. Among these, having a nightmare and receiving an ice cream cone. Number three is emotional regulation. Mothers were asked how well their children could control their emotions in the course of everyday life. Now, these three factors were correlated with the child's social competence in nursery school, and then again 2 years later in kindergarten. Among the Denham study's findings, were number one, as expected, children who possess or express mostly positive emotions at 3 and 4 were more knowledgeable about emotions and were better at regulating their own behaviors than those children who expressed more negative emotions. Number two, positive emotions were not enough to ensure a child's popularity in nursery school. For 3 and 4 years old, social competence was only predicted by the child's ability to regulate her own emotions. These children were rated highest by teachers and peers as likable. A surprise came in the later results. By the ages of 5 and 6, if a child in kindergarten expressed mostly positive emotions and knew a lot about emotions, their own and others, they were rated more socially competent in class. By this age, emotional regulation rated lower in predicting social popularity. These results raise additional questions but clearly establish the early importance of a child having a modicum of emotional intelligence for social success. Now, self-esteem is defined as a person's feeling about her worth. Self-esteem and self-respect may appear to be synonyms, but as Jack Weston points out, they are not. He explains self-esteem can be on a lower high continuum based on fantasy, whereas self-respect is based on reality. Self-esteem arises from within. You can have a good feeling about yourself. That is, you can have high self-esteem, which is based on fantasy, and still be a selfish, inconsiderate person. Children who have been spoiled can have high self-esteem, which crashes when they are frustrated and or don't get the sort of approval they have come to expect. In contrast, self-respect arises from without and refer to how you value yourself in relation to other people. It is having a good evaluation or judgment of yourself validated by realistic accomplishments and experiences with other people. Self-respect gives rise to what is called authentic high self-esteem from internally generated feelings based on reality. Now, this authentic self-esteem in children is important for a child's emotional, social, and now the research make clear also for their intellectual development. Sources of self-esteem include the following. Number one, a child's innate temperament helps shape her self-esteem. Easy, friendly temperament children tend to develop more self-esteem than children with difficult inhibited temperaments. Number two, when parents are willing to discuss household rules and discipline with them, their children's self-esteem rises too. A child then internalizes the message that she is important enough for her opinions to be heard. Number three, parents' consistent warmth, affection, and involvement with their children builds self-esteem. A hug sends the simple message, you are important to me. Number four, self-esteem also comes from the peer comparisons a child makes and the approval or rejection she experiences from peers. Number five, self-esteem comes from a child's emerging belief systems, which can be seen as an accumulation of all the preceding. When measured by researchers, self-esteem is highest in preschool and lowest at the start of junior high school. Why? One view says that the transition from elementary to high school is when children fall from secure social position to a new unfamiliar one and find themselves at the bottom of the pecking order. In one study of 2,000 low to middle income children living in the greater Detroit area, 25% of 9 to 12 years old have had negative self-esteem. Their negative view of themselves showed up on all three scales measured: academic competence, social acceptance, and global self-worth. On each scale, 5 to 10% more girls than boys displayed negative self-esteem. Now, it's also important that we talk about what self-esteem is not. Authentic self-esteem in children does not come from adults offering unearned rewards or praises. Kids as young as 7 know when they are hearing an untruth about themselves. For instance, if an adult tells a child how fabulous he just did at bat, or at shooting hoops after not being able to do so, he'll sense the adult's false praise. So what is an effective praise? What works with children is the same as with adults. Praise works well when it is, number one, specific to an accomplishment; number two, sincere; number three, intermittent. Adults shouldn't give praise willy-nilly. Simple, right? Apparently not, because in one national survey, 85% of parents think it's important to tell their kids early and often how smart they are. Now, Carol Dweck and her team of investigators at Columbia University carried out a revealing experiment with 400 fifth grade students in the New York City schools. Dweck's question was whether praise for intelligence would boost or inhibit the students' academic performance on IQ tests. The first test contained a series of simple puzzles. When the students completed the test, they were all given their scores, randomly divided into two different groups. One group was praised for their intelligence. You must be really smart. The other received praises for their effort on their test, saying that you must have worked really hard for this. For a second test, both groups were given a choice. They could take a more difficult test or opt for another easy test. Can you guess who chose which test? Of those students praised for their effort, 90% chose the harder test. A majority of the students who'd been praised for being smart chose to take another easy test. So, what does it mean? Dweck summarized the implication, saying emphasizing effort gives a child a variable they can control. In contrast, when a student is simply told how smart she is, she has no way to emotionally handle failure if she doesn't ace something. Even the risk of failure in the study caused extreme stress for those students who'd been told it was their smartness that had brought success. When Dweck repeated her experiment in schools of different socioeconomic populations, she found the outcome to be the same. It was also the same for boys and girls, with the brightest girls who were praised for intelligence being the most inclined to take the easy test. Now, the dangers of false praise for children are many and far reaching. The psychological research says too much false praise do more harm than good for children by making them, number one, more competitive, number two, grade oriented rather than learning oriented, number three, more prone to lie and cheat in school, and number four, less able to handle failure or frustration. A child can get addicted to false praise. The reward system of the brain will anticipate it and begin sending out dopamine when praise is received. Now, not receiving praise then becomes a problem for the child. Meanwhile, the ability to sustain a task and accept a certain amount of frustration and failure is essential to learning and creating in school and in life in general. When a child is too afraid of failure and too dependent on false praise, she is at greater risk for failure. Praise should be given for sustained effort, and rewards should come only with success, not a near miss. For their experience, from this experience, a child will develop authentic self-esteem and emotional resiliency. Can you teach emotional resilience? Now, this question arose largely from the field work done by child psychologist Daniel Goleman. He observed that children who were well nurtured and whose parents model and help them learn how to calm down when they're upset seem to develop greater strengths in the brain circuit for handling distress. Conversely, Goldman wrote that those children whose parents neglect them or fail to model such behaviors will be more likely to act on aggressive impulses or have trouble calming down when they are upset. He accounts for this by pointing to the brain's prefrontal cortex, where circuits for inhibiting disruption or disruptive emotional impulses and for applying one's focus to schoolwork are both located. If emotional impulses competing with attention to schoolwork for brain power are not inhibited, less attention will be available to the child's academic learning. As Goleman puts it, distress kills learning. Goleman advocates that parents and teachers teach children emotional expressivity, along with emotional knowledge and self-regulation. He co-founded a center at the University of Illinois in Chicago to develop a curriculum and train teachers to accomplish this goal. The resulting program is called SEL for Social and Emotional Learning. After a decade of the implementation of SEL programs in American school, a meta-analysis, a study of all the studies done to date, compared students who had experienced the SEL program to those who had not. The data showed significant differences between the two groups. Not only had the SEL students gained mastery of abilities such as calming down under stress, they also benefited academically. Their scores on academic achievement tests were 14% points higher than their non-SEL trained peers. So, what are the crucial skills to produce a high emotional IQ? In SEL programs, there are 5 competencies which these researchers say can be cultivated at school and at home. Number 1, self-awareness, wherein a child learns to identify her thoughts, feelings, and strengths. She makes the connections between these and her habitual actions. Number 2 is social awareness. A child identifies and understands the feeling of others, developing empathy and being able to take the perspective of others. Number 3 is self-management, where a child learns to handle emotions so they help rather than hinder the task at hand. This helps her set short and long-term goals and deal with obstacles. Number 4 is responsible decision making, where a child learns to come up with solutions to problems and implement them, as well as how to consider long-term consequences of decisions. And number 5 is relationship skills. A child learns to resist distracting peer pressure, work to resolve conflicts, and keep healthy connections with others. By learning and using these 5 competencies, the children in SEL programs exhibit higher scholastic achievement and lower behavioral problems in adolescence. So, is happiness something that can be scientifically studied? A newer branch of psychology that goes by the name of positive psychology answer this question with a resounding yes. Its proponents also say that this field of study has profound implication for children's social and emotional development. According to the psychologist credited as the founder, University of Pennsylvania professor and former American Psychological Association president Martin Seligman, positive psychology is the study of the strengths and virtues that enable individuals and communities to thrive. It includes, he says, positive emotions, positive individual traits, and positive institutions. Positive psychology generally places more emphasis on techniques for using positive thoughts and emotions to influence behavior and less on happiness as a goal or as a conceptual construct. Positive psychology provides one such avenue for self-betterment. So, how does it work, you may ask? Since we know that the physical, emotional, and cultural environment in which we live in is as important as our genetic inheritance, positive psychology can be seen as a scientific approach to maximizing the positive potential of the 50% of who we are that comes from our environment. It does this by looking for credible evidences of ways people can enhance their personal strengths by using attributes such as optimism, courage, honesty, interpersonal skills, and self-understanding. For psychologists working in this branch of the field rather, it means focusing less on repairing past traumas or the broken things in their patient's psyche and more on promoting individual and collective strengths. Now, among the research findings attributed to psychologists and sociologists working in this field are the following. Number 1, optimism can protect people from mental and physical illness. Number 2, people who report more positive emotions in young adulthood live longer and healthier lives. Number 3 is that wealth is only weakly correlated to happiness within and across nations, particularly when income is above the poverty level. Number 4 is that activities that make people happy in small doses, such as shopping, adding to cart, eating good food, binge watching series, and making money do not lead to long-term fulfillment. They have quickly diminishing returns. Um, Next is that an activity that produces the experience of flow, which I will be explaining later on, can be its own reward. And number six, people who experience gratitude on a regular basis have better physical health, optimism, and progress towards goals. They also help others more, and not yet the last pala, trying to maximize happiness can lead to unhappiness. Now, even with these practical implications, positive psychology, its adherents say, is more descriptive than prescriptive. They explain that they are conducting research in order to teach people about the consequences of their behavioral choices, such as habitual thought patterns. For example, if someone believes it's better not to have hope for a better outcome so as to avoid disappointment in life, a positive psychologist would point out that, to the contrary, positive goal setting is correlated with positive outcomes. Now, for children, the influence of positive psychology can be seen primarily in the domain of education. Its ideas are not entirely new to the school setting. In fact, positive psychology can be seen as the conceptual and practical reinforcement for the concepts of emotional IQ and emotional coaching, previously identified by psychologist Daniel Goleman and John Gottman. Aspects of positive psychology that have been adopted for use in the classroom include the following. Number one, help students lessen their negative self-talk and see challenges from more positive perspectives. It's the difference between a student failing his math test and thinking I can't do math, then giving up, and a student failing her math test and thinking, okay, I seem to be missing something in this chapter. I'll ask my teacher for extra help. Number two, teach students to identify and embrace their strengths. These are the capacities children have to think, feel, and behave in ways that can help them function better in school and with their peers. When students find and use their unique strengths, they discover their capacities to fulfill personal goals such as teamwork, leadership, creativity, self-control, and honesty. And lastly, pay attention to the positive or negative moods of students and the class as a whole. This is also referred to as the broaden and build theory of using positive emotions to improve the classroom learning environment. Positive psychology applications in the classroom take into account research that has shown the benefits of using positive emotions to enhance learning for both children and adults. Studies have shown that the experience of positive emotions is correlated with a higher quality of attention, a better working memory, and a more verbal fluency. Positive psychology asks teachers and students to focus not on their weaknesses or failures, but on their strengths and potentials. They also suggest paying the most attention to what is working for them and for the other children in the class. Using this approach, teachers and parents seek opportunities to set goals and support children in their activities. They use every opportunity to express optimism and a sense of meaning. The basic idea is that children internalize what they're feeling as they experience the behavior of adults in their lives more than what the adults say. Now, from his observation of artists and at work, psychology professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi coined the concept of flow, a state of being characterized by high concentration and initiative. Flow occurs when a person is working at a level that meets his skill but does not exceed them. For a person of any age who is in a state of flow, hours slip by as if they are minutes. They experience this time as joyous and productive. Positive psychology takes the concept of flow and looks at ways to make the experience more continuous, especially for adults in the workplace and for teachers and children in learning. One school-based application of flow encourages administrators to enhance the well-being of teachers so they can create a more positive emotional and learning environment for their children or for their students. Flow as an aspect of positive psychology has been applied to individuals working successfully in groups to understand and enhance the value of these experiences. When flow occurs in groups, people have high levels of social well-being and they feel a sense of belonging. They also experience the positive emotion of being valued for their contributions to the community. This experience is the basis of positive social engagement and civic duty. Some educators emphasize this community building aspect of positive psychology. Professor George Valiant of Harvard University states negative emotions help us to survive individually. Positive emotions help the community to survive. It is not surprising that the last few decades have seen teamwork become a cornerstone not only of academic methodology but also in the workplace. Now, if a challenge outstrips a student's existing skill set and ability, anxiety is the result. Anxiety then impedes learning. However, if a task is too easy, boredom sets in. Boredom also impedes the student's ability to learn. Positive psychology says that the best way to foster flow for a student in a classroom is for teachers to adopt activities that include interactivity and a playful attitude towards learning. Professor Ben Shabar or Shahar at Harvard University does this by assigning students exercises connecting positive psychology to their personal experiences. British educational consultant Jenny Fox Eads of the Center for Applied Positive Psychology offered several pointers for the successful application of these principles in her article celebrating strengths. Among them are the following. Number one, encourage students to go outside of their comfort zones into what she calls stretch zones, where they're challenged but do not fear making mistakes. Number two, model and teach aspects of resilience, such as the ability to notice and control your emotions, a good sense of self-esteem, and a belief in your ability to make a difference and achieve goals. And number three, demonstrate satisfaction with your ability to store happy memories and use them as a buffer against hard times. A teacher's most important role, Fox Aids points out, may be to model the process of encouragement by encouraging others and oneself to keep trying. Another method used by some teachers and school administrators for enhancing student flow is to increase opportunities for young people's engagement in civic projects. The purpose of these community activities is to give children and teenagers the experience of social belonging and the benefit of internalizing their experiences at an early age. This can be seen as an antidote to the overemphasis of individual achievement and testing in schools. So, in summary, praising the effort of a child makes it uh, uh, praising the effort of a child is more effective in building her emotional and intellectual IQ than telling her how smart she is. Number two, unconditional love from parents is necessary for a child to learn self-acceptance and to build emotional resiliency. In school programs and new individual and group psychotherapies can help a child build low emotional competence to do better socially and academically. Now, the abilities to bounce back from failure and to delay gratification are at the heart of a child's emotional and social growth. Also, research in the field of positive psychology supports the effectiveness of techniques that promote positive emotions in educational and family setting. Once again, my name is Dex Kamitan and thank you for watching.